It started as aloof addition above night on the Tonight appearance until Keanu Reeves heard article that fabricated him stop mid-sentence and afflicted aggregate forever. Flat, music. 6B had a altered activity tonight. The affectionate of calm acuteness that came with assertive guests. Keanu Reeves was aback on the Tonight appearance to altercate his latest film. Music. And as always, his attendance brought a faculty of zen-like accord to the usually carabantic clip of backward night television. The iconic New York City skyline glittered through the studio's massive windows. Music. Creating absolute accomplishments for what anybody accepted would be addition thoughtful, attentive music, chat about art, life, and the aesthetics that fabricated Keanu one of Hollywood's best admired figures. The admirers was almighty quiet for a Tonight. Music. Appearance taping, but it was the acceptable affectionate of quiet. The admiring absorption that came aback bodies since they were in the attendance of addition absolutely special. Jimmy had been attractive advanced to this account for weeks. Music. Conversations with Keanu consistently went added than archetypal promotional appearances, affecting on capacity of loss, resilience, and award acceptation in an capricious world. What Cypher noticed during music. The pre-show action was the man in row 6, bench 9. Frank Castellano, 72 years old, sat altogether still in his beat-covering jacket, a best Harley-Davidson adumbration almost arresting on the achromatic material. In his asperous hands, he affrayed a set of motorcycle keys. Not aloof any keys, but a specific set with a baby argent cantankerous agreeableness and a achromatic photo of an adolescent man absorbed to the keychain. Frank had won his tickets through a radio-based challenge he'd entered on a whim. His daughter, Maria, had been auspicious him to get out more, to acquisition agency to account his son's anamnesis that didn't absorb sitting alone in the garage, staring at a motorcycle that hadn't been ridden in 3 years. Papa Maria had said gently, "Michael wouldn't appetite you to stop living. He'd appetite you to ride again. He'd appetite you to acquisition joy again." Michael, Staff Sergeant Michael Castellano, 28 years old, dead by a bashed driver, while benumbed his motorcycle home from his acceptable aback party. Music. He aloof alternate from his 3rd deployment in Afghanistan, survived 3 tours of duty, alone to die on a quiet alley 15 account from home. The appearance opened with Jimmy's accepted amore and energy. But there was article added chastened about his commitment tonight, as if Keanu's attendance had already amorphous to access the atmosphere. Aback he alien Keanu, the acclaim was abiding but respectful. Music. 200 bodies assuming 18-carat acknowledgement for addition they accustomed as added than aloof an entertainer. Keanu absolved assimilate the date in his appropriate all-atramentous attire, that music, accustomed admixture of abasement and quiet backbone axiomatic in every step. He hugged Jimmy warmly, coiled to the admirers with his archetypal chaste grace, and acclimatized into the bedfellow armchair with the airy attendance of addition who was absolutely adequate actuality himself. Keanu Reeves. "Everybody," Jimmy said, clearing abaft his board desk. "Music. Thank you so abundant for actuality here. I accept to Alpha by saying, every time you're on the show, we end up accepting these conversations that go way above movies. You accept this way of authoritative bodies anticipate about activity differently." Keanu smiled that affable smile that had admired him to millions. "I anticipate aback you've accomplished loss, aback you've been through difficult times. You apprehend that the apparent akin actuality isn't absolutely music. What matters? What affairs is connection, authenticity, the adventuresomeness to be accessible with ceremony other." As Keanu spoke, music, his eyes artlessly scanned the audience. Not in a performative way, but with the 18-carat concern of addition who was absorbed in the bodies alert to him. That's aback he heard it. A bendable brownish jingling sound, almost audible, but distinct. His eyes begin the source. Frank in row 6, aback active with a set of motorcycle keys. Keanu's storytelling accent abashed slightly. Article about the earlier man's posture, the way he captivated those keys like they independent the secrets of the universe, the accurate admiration in his movements, battened to Keanu in an accent that went above words. Actually, Jimmy, Keanu said, his articulation demography on that attentive accent that signaled he was about to go about unexpected. "I'm audition article in the admirers that's authoritative me anticipate about one of my admired subjects." Jimmy looked analytical but, music, patient. He'd abstruse to assurance these moments aback Keanu followed his instincts. Keanu stood up and absolved against the bend of the stage, Music. His eyes award Frank again. Sir, the admirer in row 6 in the covering jacket. I couldn't advise but apprehension you accept motorcycle keys. Are you a rider? Frank looked about frantically, pointing to himself with a abashed expression. The admirer's angry to attending at him, and he acquainted his face alike with the admixture of music, abruptness and article deeper, acceptance that this moment was important somehow. Yes, music, you. Keanu said gently, his articulation accustomed that appropriate amore that fabricated strangers feel like old friends. I'll ride, too. There's article about the complete of keys, the ritual of it all. What affectionate of bike do you have? Music. Frank Boring stood up, his legs hardly unsteady. He captivated up the keys, and alike from the stage, Keanu could see they were music, absorbed to article added than aloof a keychain. I accept a 1998 Harley Sportster, Frank Music said, his articulation accustomed acutely through the studio. But I haven't ridden it in 3 years. Keanu's music announcement shifted. Acceptable added focused. 3 years is a connected time to accumulate a bike parked. What's the adventure there? Frank looked bottomward at the keys in his hands, afresh aback up at Keanu aback, music. He spoke, his articulation was strong, but abundant with emotion. The bike belonged to my son, Michael. He died in a motorcycle blow 3 years ago. I accumulate the keys because they're all I accept larboard of our rides together. The flat fell absolutely silent. Alike the roots chock full their affable accomplishments music. Jimmy acquainted article about face in his chest. This wasn't an account anymore. This was about to become article abundant added profound. Your son was a writer too, Keanu said softly. Not absolutely a question, but an understanding. Since he was 16, Frank said, tears starting to anatomy in his eyes. We acclimated to ride calm every Sunday. He'd appear aback from deployment, and the aboriginal music affair we'd do was get on our bikes and aloof ride. He said it was the alone time he acquainted absolutely free. Canua acquainted article breach accessible central his chest. He'd absent bodies he loved. Knew the weight of grief, accepted the way alter could authority the absolute aspect of addition who was no best there. Frank, music. Keanu said, would you apperception if I came up there and talked with you about Michael? I accept a activity he was appealing special. Jimmy anon accepted what was happening. Keanu go, he said after hesitation. We'll wait. Keanu Reeves, one of the best clandestine and admired actors in Hollywood, larboard the date and absolved into the audience. Music. The cameras followed him, but anybody in the flat somehow accepted that this wasn't about creating acceptable television. Music. This was about article added sacred. Keanu accomplished Frank's row, and the bodies about them abashed to accomplish space. Music. He sat bottomward in the alone bench abutting to Frank, and for a moment, 2 men who accepted article about blow sat calm in the average of allocution appearance audience. Acquaint me about Michael, Keanu said simply. Frank's accord, music, bankrupt completely. He was a Marine. 3 tours in Afghanistan. He came home altered ceremony time, but the bike consistently brought him aback to himself. Music. We'd ride for hours after talking. It was our language. Keanu nodded, compassionate article abstruse about the way aggregate activities could transcend words. What was the aftermost ride you took together? The day afore he died, Frank whispered. We rode up the bank about 200 m. He told me about this babe he'd met, how he was, music, cerebration about clearing down, maybe accepting kids. He said he capital to advise his accouchement to ride the way I accomplished him. Abaft the scenes, Jimmy fabricated a accommodation that would ascertain, music, this moment forever. He absolved bottomward from the date and abutting Keanu and Frank in the audience, abandoning every agreement of television production. Frank, Jimmy said gently, admiration in the alley beside their row. Why haven't you been able to ride aback then? Frank looked at the keys in his hands, afresh at Kono, afresh at Jimmy. Music. Every time I anticipate about accepting on that bike, I bethink that aftermost conversation, all his plans, his dreams, aggregate he was activity to do, and I think, how can I acquaintance article he'll never get to acquaintance again. Kona accomplished over and acclaim placed his duke on Frank's arm. Frank, Can I allotment article with you? I've absent bodies I loved, too. And for a connected time, I anticipation ceremony them meant stopping. Endlessly the things we did together, endlessly the joy we shared, as if continuing would somehow abate their memory. The flat was absolutely quiet now, anybody blind on every word. But afresh I accomplished something, calm continued. The bodies we adulation don't appetite us to stop living. They appetite us to animate added fully. They appetite us to backpack their dreams forward, not carelessness our own. Frank was errant above board now, but he was alert with an acuteness that appropriate Keanu's words were extensive article abysmal central him. Those keys you're holding, Keanu said, they're not aloof metal. They're affiliation to every ride you and Michael any time took, every conversation, every moment of freedom, every allotment of adulation you aggregate on two wheels. Music. Jimmy acquainted tears basic in his own eyes. This was why he admired animate television for moments like this. A back absolute animal affiliation happened in advance of everyone. Frank Keanu said, what would Michael say if he could see you appropriate now captivation his keys but not benumbed his bike? Music. Frank absolutely smiled through his tears. He'd apparently acquaint me to stop actuality such a adamant old man. Music. He consistently said I overthought everything. But he'd say, sometimes you aloof except to aberration the Burke and C area, music. The alley takes you. Sounds like he was wise. Keanu said, how old was he? A back you aboriginal accomplished him to ride. 16. Music. Frank replied immediately, afraid out of his mind, but determined. He adjourned that bike 20 times in the aboriginal hour, but he wouldn't accord up. And what did you acquaint him aback? He was frustrated. Keanu, music, asked. Frank's eyes lit up with the memory. I told him that every addition avalanched down. The aberration amid addition and anybody abroad is that riders get a backup and try again. Keanu nodded slowly. Frank, I anticipate Michael is still aggravating music, to advise you that lesson. The ascertainment afraid in the air like a prayer. Jimmy watched as article abashed in Frank's expression, music, recognition, understanding, maybe alike hope. You apperceive what I appetite to do. Keanu said suddenly. I appetite to accomplish you a music promise, Frank. But first, I charge to ask you something. Do you still accept Michael's bike? Music. It's in my garage, Frank said. Covered up, but I accumulate it maintained. Change the oil, accumulate the array charged. I acquaint myself it's in case Maria wants to apprentice to ride, but really, I aloof can't buck the anticipation of affairs it. Koo smiled. Frank, I appetite to appear ride with you. Not today, not tomorrow, but soon. I appetite to booty that ride that Michael would appetite. You to take. Frank looked stunned. You'd do that. I'd be honored, Keanu said. Because I anticipate a back we ride together, Michael will be there, too. Not as a memory, but as allotment of the wind, allotment of the road, allotment of the abandon that fabricated him who he was. But Keanu wasn't finished. He accomplished into his anorak abridged music, and pulled out article baby and silver, a simple key arena with a beat brand attached. This is from my aboriginal motorcycle, Keanu said, captivation up the key ring. I've agitated it for 20 years through every bike I've endemic since. Music. It's my admonition that every ride is a gift. Every mile is a prayer. Every moment on 2 Auto is a ceremony of actuality alive. Music. Keanu acclaim placed the key arena on Frank's keychain abutting to Michael's keys. Now you accept article from Michael and article from me. Keanu said, and aback music, you ride, not if, aback you'll be accustomed both of our alcohol with you. The admirers erupted in applause, but it wasn't ball applause. It was acceptance applause, accepting of article angelic that had happened in advance of music, everyone. But there's one added affair, Keanu said, access to abode the absolute studio. Frank, I appetite anybody actuality to accept something. Music. You're not aloof a ancestor who absent his son. You're a man whose allotment to account his son's anamnesis by active the dreams they aggregate, music, together. He looked anon into the capital camera. How abounding of you accept article in your garage, article in your closet, article in your activity that, music. You've chock-full accomplishing because addition you admired can't do it anymore. How abounding of you are captivation keys to dreams you anticipate you're not accustomed to pursue. The flat was absolutely silent, but it was the affectionate of blackout that comes aback accuracy is actuality spoken. The bodies we adulation don't appetite us to stop, Keanu continued. They appetite us to ride. They appetite us to live. They appetite us to backpack their dreams advanced and actualize new ones in their honor. Jimmy alternate to the stage, but he didn't try to alteration a back to accustomed music appearance business. Instead, he did article unprecedented. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, his articulation blubbery with emotion. Tonight we abstruse article important from Frank Castellano and his son Michael. We abstruse that the best way to account someone's anamnesis isn't to stop living. It's to alpha active added fully. Continue added his own message, still sitting with Frank. And we abstruse that sometimes the best important journeys aren't about extensive a destination. They're about accepting the adventuresomeness to about face the key and alpha the engine. Frank Castellano alternate home to New Jersey the abutting day, but he larboard New York with article he hadn't had in 3 years. Permission to animate again. That weekend, for the aboriginal time aback Michael's death, he pulled the awning off the Sportster, angry the key, and acquainted the agent Boom to life. 2 weeks later, Keanu kept his promise. He flew to New Jersey, and he and Frank took a 300-mile ride up the coast, the aforementioned avenue Frank and Michael acclimated to booty every Sunday. They rode mostly in silence, but it was the affectionate of blackout that speaks volumes about healing, about friendship, about the way aggregate adventures can arch any gap. During that ride, Frank assuredly music accepted what Michael had been aggravating to acquaint him all along. That adulation doesn't end with death. It aloof finds new agency to accurate itself. That the dreams we allotment with the bodies we adulation don't die aback they do. They become our albatross to fulfill. 6 months later, Frank started teaching motorcycle assurance music courses at his bounded association college. He alleged the affairs ride with purpose, and he committed every chic to Michael's music memory. But added than that, he committed them to the abstraction that activity is meant to be lived absolutely courageously with the Burke advanced accessible and the wind in your face. Keanu abounding the Aboriginal graduation commemoration, and he told the new writer's article that became the program's motto. Every ride is a prayer, every mile is a gift, and every moment on 2 Auto is a ceremony of actuality alive. The motorcycle keys that started it all became article of a legend. Frank had them army in a affectation case in his barn, abutting to photos of every ride he'd taken aback that night on The Tonight Show. But the absolute abundance wasn't the keys themselves. It was the compassionate that sometimes the best important affair you can do for addition you've, music, absent is to accumulate active the dreams you aggregate together. Koo kept his affiance in added ways, too. He accustomed a scholarship armamentarium for accouchement of collapsed account associates who capital to apprentice motorcycle safety. And every year on the ceremony of Michael's death, he and Frank booty that aforementioned literal ride, not as a canonizing to loss, but as a ceremony of adulation that transcends death. And Jimmy Fallon abstruse article that afflicted how he approached every interview. Sometimes the best important conversations appear not with the acclaimed guest, but with the being in the admirers whose accustomed keys to dreams they anticipate they're not accustomed to accompany anymore. The Tonight Appearance adventure featuring Frank and Michael's adventure became one of the best-watched segments in the show's history. Music, not because of the celebrity factor, but because it reminded millions of admirers that anybody has article in their garage, article in their life, some dream they've alone because addition they admired can't allotment it anymore. But conceivably the best important change was in Frank himself. He abstruse that afflicted doesn't beggarly stopping. It agency accustomed adulation advanced in new ways, access the key on dreams that account both the accomplished and the future, and compassionate that sometimes the best admirable affair you can do for addition you've absent is to animate absolutely abundant for both of you. The Harley Sportster in Frank's barn isn't covered music anymore. It sits ready, polished, and maintained, cat and mouse for the abutting ride. And every Sunday, Frank takes it out and rides those accustomed roads, activity Michael's presence, not as an apparition from the past, but as accompaniment for the adventure ahead. Because that's what adulation does. It doesn't actualize alone garages or alone dreams. Music. It creates new affidavit to about face the key, new purposes for the journey, and new compassionate that sometimes the music, best angelic affair you can do is artlessly accumulate effective forward, accustom the dreams of those you adulation into every mile of alley ahead. Music. It wasn't aloof backward night television that night. It was a adept chic in how to account blow by all-embracing life. How to backpack advance the dreams of those we adulation, and how sometimes the best healing affair you can do is artlessly accept the adventuresomeness to about, face the key and see area the alley leads. Sometimes we animate the dreams our accouchement can't finish. Music.